You're listening to Sensitive, Spiritual, and Successful, the podcast where we uncover ways to connect you back to your soul self and get you unstuck so that you can live out your full potential. I'm Jasmine Lynn, a former psychotherapist turned human design soul guide and EFT tapping success coach, and I'm here to show you how to love yourself through all your levels of growth. I know you're here because you have an impact you want to make in this world and you have a light to share, and I'm here to guide you through that journey because you deserve soul-aligned success. Before we begin, I just wanted to let everyone know about a wonderful resource my good friend Hannah and I have created. It is called the Self-Healing Haven, and our vision is really just to provide accessible courses for people to dive deeper into their healing journeys. You know, we've learned a number of very effective tools and powerful information to help people heal throughout, well, Hannah's years as a naturopath and myself as a former psychotherapist. Our vision is just to share this information with as many people as possible to create a ripple effect of enlightenment, positive energy, and of course, growth. So join us, www.theselfhealinghaven.com. We are in the process of uploading some courses for everyone, and we hope you enjoy. All right, let's dive into the episode. Hi, everyone. I have Ashleigh here. Ashleigh is an experienced, award-winning practitioner of integrative health, holistic energy, and intuitive wellness with over 10 years of experience in clinical practice. Her background is a registered holistic nutritionist, and she is also a practitioner of vibrational healing, like flower essences, and that is through Inner Plant Wisdom. She is here to talk to us today about flower essences because I am super curious about it, and that's why I decided to bring her on. Hi, Ashleigh.
I am so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And you know what? Why don't we, because I know you already, can you introduce yourself? And because we talk human design on this podcast, you want to introduce yourself with your human design so people get to know you?
Of course, I love that idea. I don't know what to say other than what you've said before, but like you said, I've been in clinical practice for over 10 years. And what's kind of interesting is that I discovered flower essences actually through my dad's medical doctor, which is not the normal way that you might discover something like flower essences, which is considered a vibrational healing modality. But he actually gave me a form that had a list of different modalities, support, supplements, all the kind of nutritional background that might help someone with dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, which is what my dad had. And on that list was flower essences, if you could believe it. And so this was over 15 years ago. And I remember thinking, what the heck is a flower essence? So if you also are thinking, what the heck is a flower essence? You're in the right place. As you said, I, like you, am interested in human design, and I am a 1-3 sacral generator. So as you remind me, I like to dive deep, and then apparently I'm supposed to experiment with this knowledge as I share it with others, which is sometimes the challenging part, right? Is to see that line 3 as a gift and not as these kind of repeated failures or different experiences where you're often trying on different experiences.
Yes. Yeah. We'll just jump right in. Why is holistic healing so important to you?
I think it's always a complementary modality. So it's not, a lot of people have this perspective that it's either Western medicine, allopathic medicine, or it's natural health, natural healing. And I feel like the best part is to bridge the best of both worlds, right? We can have, emergency supports when we need them, but also when we're thinking about long-term illness and even acute conditions, right? If we can support the body to naturally heal itself, that's ultimately what is my goal and what is my hope for everyone. As I do believe at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what modality you're using. Every modality you use is a self-healing modality. It triggers the body into essentially having a response to what you're doing. And then the body can ultimately just naturally do what it does through our nervous system, through our lymphatic system, all of these different systems of the body working together, almost like a symphony or as a concert, right? Which is why vibrational healing is fun, of course, that idea of a symphony, and also frequencies, right?
Yes. I love that you have that perspective as well, is that it's there are a lot of different modalities and there are, maybe a time and a place for certain interventions and things, but looking at it from a holistic lens is really important. Tell us more about flower essences Like, just give us the rundown. How does it work?
So, for the most part, in the way that they have traditionally been used is through supporting our emotional and our mental health more than anything. They can be used for physical aspects, and obviously, we use them for spiritual aspects every day. But flower essence at the end of the day are energized infusions. So, it's kind of a sacred dance, we'll say, between the sun, the water, and then the flowers that are placed on top. So, this modality of flower essences has been used for centuries, which a lot of people don't realize. It has been used since at least the 1400, um, for 14th century, and they actually would collect the morning dew from flowers, and they would use that in poultices and in other healing modalities where they would place it directly on the skin. And there are a lot of kind of well-known figures that would do that. And then, I don't know if it perhaps lost favor or perhaps people just weren't as connected to nature as we moved a little bit away from nature. But in the 1950s, Dr. Bach, and if you're in the UK, the way that traditionally his name is pronounced is Dr. Batch. And you've probably seen his little bottle at the health food store, which is usually the place that most people discover them. And they think, oh, what is this? What's in this bottle? What can it do? And then the one that most people have usually heard of is Rescue Remedy. So if someone is in a state of stress or shock or fright or flight, Rescue Remedy is often one that we use. And we can use it for animals, for pets, for people of all ages, which is one of the beautiful parts of this modality is that it's really not limited to a certain type of person or any kind of situation. So we have flower essences really to support us in all areas of our life.
Oh, that is so okay, so that is interesting because as you were speaking, I was thinking of asking you the difference between essential oils
Oh, yes.
and flower essences because you said, animals and children, and then when you look at essential oils, it's like a warning, don't use it on cats, don't use it on dogs and things like that. So, yeah, do you wanna give us the
Huge.
difference? Yeah.
That's huge. That's probably my most favorite question, mostly
Good.
because, as I said, flower essences can be used for any age. So I started using flower essences with my son the day he was born. I literally put flower essences into his belly, help him anchor his spirit into his body and into the earth. And then obviously I've been using them ever since. And he picks out his own flower essences and he can really see and sense the different colors and frequencies that are around flower essences. So I find that really interesting where he might choose the same one 3 days in a row. And then it's like, no, mama, I don't need that one anymore. Now he's on to the next one. Um, the big difference between essential oils and herbal tinctures, anything that's kind of a herbal nature like that, all of those products contain some physical material or physical matter. So that plant still is retained in the product, right? We're using essential oil that's a concentrated oil of the plant itself. Flower essences do not contain any physical matter or physical material in them. So they are solely and completely just vibrational healing. The flowers are placed on the water and that captures the imprint of what that flower might be used for in terms of healing. And a good kind of reference point that a lot of people perhaps have heard of or maybe have come across in their research is Dr. Emoto's work, where he did the work with imprints on water and embodying them with different emotions and feelings, and then to see how the patterns of those different waters actually changed when they were frozen. So you could see kind of sacred geometry that exists in that. So that is very much, part of the mechanism that they believe is at work when flower essences are involved. And it is, for the most part, the vast majority of the Bach remedies, for example, rely on the sun. There are a couple that they actually prepare on the stove, more like a herbal tincture, but they also use different materials. So there's things like rock water, for example, which is not a plant, obviously, and other different, there are essences made from environments. So sometimes I've captured the environmental aspect of, say, a waterfall, for example, just to feel that healing frequency. And of course, because it's experimental, we have no idea what this might be used for. This is a perfect way of kind of dabbling and getting a sense of that. And obviously, the more intuitive you are, the deeper you can connect to what that essence might be used for.
Oh, that is so interesting. I have so many questions. Like, I'm trying to should have
I
put a pen in a paper. I mean, I wrote down questions, but as you're speaking, more questions are coming. But, so flower essences are more like, when you say essential oils have physical aspect to it, is that like the oil part? Like, when you
Yeah,
talk about flower essences, it sounds like it's just water and the essence of the flower. Like,
correct.
it's just water.
Yep,
Okay.
it's water and that's why I say energized infusions, right? So the
Right.
idea of frequency or an energetic to the water. But the flowers are all discarded, right? So there's a secret process that obviously starts, right? Nobody is making flower essence if they're kind of not of the right vibration. And oftentimes plants will not actually work with you if you are not in line with kind of what their mission is and what their purpose is. Um, and so that's, I think, really important to think about too. It's very much a sacred process. Dr. Bach, for example, always relied on using a crystal bowl, for example. So other people have different kind of tools and things that they use to guide their practice, but the flowers ultimately are discarded from the water. And then that energized infusion is what we use. And mostly to keep it for long-term use is there's always a preservative added. So with Dr. Bach's remedies, they would always add brandy. That's traditionally what I use. I use a Canadian cask brandy that I can get pretty readily. For people who are obviously sensitive to alcohol, I'll use something like a glycerin, like a plant glycerin. Usually that's an organic plant glycerin, and then that just has a sweet taste to it. So that's really what people are tasting, and children are just tasting, a couple drops of that. And then if you just really wanted for short-term use, then obviously you just wouldn't add a preservative, but you'd have to keep it in the fridge. And just because it is still a relationship with nature, and obviously nature over time begins to degrade.
Right. Yes. So you mentioned that you can put it in your mouth, that you can taste it, but also you also mentioned topically as well?
That's right. Yeah. So the traditional way that Dr. Bach always recommended was a couple drops a couple times a day. So there's no hard and fast rule about how many different drops. Certain companies say, oh, you must use 4 drops of our remedies. Other companies will say just 1 drop suffices. I like to say 3 to 4 drops, 3 to 4 times a day. And that really allows your body to not only get used to the frequency, but also learn how to use it. And so traditionally they use them orally. Dr. Bach always recommended, just taking them that way. But as we become more sensitive, as our frequency changes, as we begin to ascend, at the same time, our body's becoming more sensitive. So people who are considered highly sensitive people, for example, may not want to use them in that way. Or if you're one of those people that perhaps is a little bit skeptical, how do these, energized waters work? You might want to try one of my favorite ways, which is to actually take a couple drops. Oh, look, I happen to have a bottle of flower essence right here. And you might take 2 drops in the palm of your hand. This is like a combo topical slash olfactory way, but I take a couple drops in and I breathe it in like that. And Sue Lilly, who wrote this beautiful book called The Essence Practitioner, she's based in the UK. She recommended this method because olfactory is actually one of the fastest way to introduce a new frequency or a new kind of essence into our own energy field. So if you're one of those people that's skeptical and thinks to yourself, well, I don't know how this could possibly work, I highly recommend using the olfactory method because you're almost certainly going to feel either a sense of expansion or a sense of like higher energies. You might even feel your posture changes. So it's a great way to kind of connect with the plants in this way. Um, and as you mentioned, topical is a great way too. So there's a particular type of flower that if you're wandering the woods kind of in later summer, you might find, and it's the kind of nickname for it is touch me not, but it's called jewel weed. And many herbalists use it after bites. So if you get bit by mosquitoes, for example, you might put some of the jewel weed, or even, I mean, I don't know if it's one that you can chew up and put on, but sometimes they do a poultice. But jewelweed as a flower essence works very similarly. So it's essentially an etheric way of addressing an insect bite. So if you got a mosquito bite, you could put a drop of jewelweed flower essence on your skin, immediately take the sting away, which is so powerful in the wild, right? But it's a perfect example of how you could be a skeptic and the essences will still work. They're not really bothered about whether or not you believe in them or not.
That is interesting. Can you give us a little history of Dr. Bach? Like, what brought him to look at flowers and using them as a healing modality? Yeah, I'm very curious about that.
How did he do that? He was actually an incredibly intuitive fellow and has a background as a homeopath. So he was already working in a way where he was using energetic remedies. And it's funny that I came to flower essences first and then homeopathy second, but I very much love both of these modalities, and they're the main foundation of my family's healing. Often a lot of the work that I do with clients as well, really just using these energetic remedies in a way to support the body at all stages of life. But because he was so intuitive, he really could for lack of a better word, channel the energies of these plants and figure out what they were trying to do and what they were trying to say. And obviously, from the 1950s till now, that's 70 plus years of people using them, thousands of people, millions probably of people around the world using these remedies. And it's it's really incredible because just to see them in practice and to actually experience them, you never know what kind of experience you're going to have. Can I share a little story of just two, maybe perhaps two Dr. Bach remedies that I've used in the past that I had very profound experiences with?
Yeah, of course. That was one of my questions. Like when someone is working on healing, what's like something you hear, something that you experience that they're like, oh my gosh, this is,
Worse.
like, yeah, like this is helping me. So yeah, feel free to share some stories.
I'll share a story of holly. And so holly is a big heart opener essence, and it's often used for kind of the flip sides of love, right? So people who feel like perhaps they've been betrayed, they might have anger, they might have jealousy issues. Like it's a very kind of tough type of essence. And I thought to myself, oh, I want to experience my one, my line three action, my line three in action, right? I want to experience this for myself. And so for the people who say that they're skeptical, I often say, okay, well, if one dose you didn't feel the effects of it, try taking a couple doses in quick succession. So that's what I did with this remedy. I think I was journaling late at night. This was probably at least 5 or 6 years ago. And oh, it'd be 8 years ago, roughly. And I was doing a little journaling practice. I thought, oh, I'm going to work with holly today. And I took 2 drops on the tongue and I'm like, okay. And then 5 minutes go by, took another 2 drops on the tongue. 5 minutes go by, another 2 drops on the tongue. And I just started bawling. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I just felt this overwhelming, deep connection to everything around me. In particular, I was thinking of my best friend at the time who was going through a hard time. And I was like, oh my God, I just love you so much. And it was just like this, you can imagine like just tears streaming down my face and just this feeling of like just excessive, extreme, just beautiful love for, our fellow humans. And I thought, for people who are perhaps a little skeptical, it's a great way to experience it for yourself. And I'm not saying that everybody should take holly, maybe 3 times in the span of 15 minutes, but it's a great way to kind of get a sense of really the essence of the essence, right? Like what it might be used for. So that deep sense of connection and love really acted as a beautiful heart opener. And another Bach remedy is hornbeam. And so some people refer to it as the Monday morning essence. So that kind of Monday morning blah, like I don't really want to go to work. This is for people who don't enjoy the work, not like you and I, obviously. But that the old kind of story or history around that more heart attacks happen on Monday mornings because people are not eager to go to work. So this is kind of the remedy for getting us going when we're procrastinating on something that we know we need to do and just need to get done. And so hornbeam has a special place in my heart because after my dad, who, as I mentioned, had early onset Alzheimer's, you know, he died. And I was kind of in that feeling of grief of knowing that there were things that I need to take care of post, his passing. And I just could not muster up the courage, the energy, the interest. I would say I certainly had, you know, it's not the first dark night of the soul I've had in this life, but it definitely was in that kind of feeling of not feeling motivated to move on or to do anything. And I remember thinking, I wonder if hornbeam can help. And I hadn't had any experience with that one either. And just having read a little bit about it, I hadn't seen anybody else using it kind of in a context of grief. But for me, it was just the trigger I needed. All of a sudden, I was getting the paperwork done and I was moving forward. And obviously, you're still processing your grief at the same time, but there were certain paperwork, obviously, that has to get done after the fact that you really can't wait on. You got 2 days to do this, 5 days to do this, da da da. And it's, I had been in that state probably for 2 or 3 months of not getting the things I need to get done just off my plate and just so that the government was happy and all the other agencies that want something. But hornbeam, yeah, perfect example of something that just gave me the motivation and just suddenly I had the energy to kind of pull myself up and start moving again in the right direction. So I always recommend it as an essence for people who are not motivated. So if, for example, you're stuck in a job you don't like and you're going to have to motivate yourself to either work on your passion project or something that you're interested in, work-wise, you're kind of getting, maybe a new business off the ground and you're, spurred by your own energy, but at the same time, you're tired from your day job. Hornbeam can be a great one to just motivate us and help us do the things that we know we need to do, right? Start a new diet plan, hornbeam.
That that sounds like a good one. They both sound like great ones. And moving on to the next question, it's like, how do they determine what each flower does, like how it correlates to an issue? Is that like an intuitive thing? Like what properties, things like that?
There's different modalities. I know that some companies will work with people who are particularly clairvoyant, so they can even see colors around the aura. They can see how the energy field changes. So there's a lot of kind of, depends on your definition of science, but there are a lot of scientific experiments they're doing around this. It depends on the company, obviously. A lot of the people who go into essence making tend to be very intuitive people. So perhaps they're channeling the plants, perhaps they're connecting with the plant kind of on an alternate dimension or level. I also think that just from practical use, like a lot of companies will just do kind of what they call kind of research essences. So they'll find a flower that they're drawn to. Obviously, they're not working with any flowers that they don't have like a deep kind of connection to and obviously a relationship with, but they'll create like little research essence bottles and they'll say, hey, we need 10 or 15 people to kind of experiment with this bottle and tell us what it's used for. And so that can be a great way of learning more about, if 3 or 4 people, it's kind of like in homeopathy, we talk about doing provings, right? So you're trying a different remedy and people are going to talk about, oh, what dreams they had and how did they feel and what did they feel like eating and any kind of new things that came into their awareness, right? So very much working with flower essences. I also think just even to use flower essences, you have to be relatively, you don't necessarily need to be intuitive, but you have to be relatively self-aware. So that's part of, even if people don't have the energetic sensations that perhaps, I might experience, they can still have an awareness of, I didn't have the motivation to do something. And then all of a sudden for 2 weeks, I had the energy to get the things done that I need to do. So that level of awareness, right? Or even just noticing like, hey, I've been a little bit, snappy with my husband, right? Taking a flower essence that might kind of calm us down or even something for different times of the month, right? So if we're even just thinking about like, how can we channel that frustration in a different way? I also think very much so, and this obviously is no surprise to anyone who ever works with plants, but the plants themselves have a really kind of they illuminate what they might be used for. So different flowers are different colors. Different colors might be associated with the chakra or even traditional Chinese medicine. So some people work with them in that way, different colors, different shapes, different sizes. The flower itself can tell us a little bit about what it might be used for. Combine that with intuitive practice and you can kind of correlate whether or not the information rings true or not.
Yes. Okay. I love that. You answered another question that I had. So told you she is a 1-3. She knows her stuff.
Right? It's not necessarily even coming from me. This is also part of my human design, right? With the gate
Yeah.
7, that's a big part of my practice that I really didn't realize was part of me until I learned about human design.
Yeah. She's very intuitive and she is a very gifted Akashic Records reader. I got a reading from Ashley and it was amazing. So, yeah, like I said, she knows a lot about a lot and she's good at what she does. So if someone were to want to work with you, let's say with flower essences or maybe with an intuitive reading attached to it, how do they do that? Like, how do they book that appointment? How do they contact you?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned like one of my favorite services of all time, which is like an Akashic Records reading combined with a custom flower essence blend. So it's like we have issues come up, we have this beautiful awareness of these new things, and then we leave the session thinking like, how do I fix this or change this or start moving in the direction that obviously my soul wants me to move in. And then you can have this custom flower essence blend. Typically, I'll say that if you're doing a blend, you don't generally Dr. Box said between 5 and 8 essences. So some people have this tendency to want to put, 25 different essences in there. And I find that can sometimes, as much as, sometimes more is better, more is not always better. 25 essences might be very confusing because those are individual frequencies that the body is now having to parse and understand and really embody, right? This is the process of embodying the energies and frequencies of these plants. Um, but that's a beautiful way. And I always say that people can come to my website if you wanted to include a link or some way to have it come up. But yeah, going to my website, I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and all the usual places. And really, I just like connecting with people face to face. So that's always good too when I do my in-person event.
Yes. Oh, can you tell everyone which I know you have 2 profiles. Which one is best for people to connect?
Both are good. I mostly use my Hi Ashleigh Grange Instagram one, and my flower essence one is usually strictly I just post about plants and inner plant wisdom. And I do have actually another in-person flower essence custom blend making workshop where people can make their own custom blend. And that's coming up at the end of the month, actually. Time flies.
Perfect. Okay. So there are ways that people can work with you. And do you make your own flower essences?
I do. I do.
Okay.
The flower essences that I mostly work with. So obviously I didn't really talk about the essences that I use, but I have over at this point 700 different essences that are in my, we'll say, plant apothecary. I have some from different areas of the world where you can only get those essences if you actually travel to those places. They will not ship outside of the country of origin, like Mexico, for example. Uh, and then I also make my own flower essences. And mostly the flower essences that I work with are all wildflowers. So some people might call them weeds. I call them wildflowers because, of course, every plant has its place. And these are often really potent energies because the plant has been disturbed or bothered in some way. So when you think of a wildflower, it's like they've disturbed the soil. Maybe there's been construction or there's farming or something. And suddenly this wildflower pops up, super resilient. And the flower essence itself reflects that. Like they're very potent energies. Some people will say, oh, this is too much. I gotta use this on my skin because I can't possibly take this orally. So those are just, kind of some ways that we can manage, just embodying these energies and working with them on a regular daily basis. Because we do want to work with them regularly, right? Flower essences are not really something that sometimes they can be. You can use them for obviously acute scenarios, but for the most part, Dr. Bach always said a 21-day course of flower essences. So working with a blend or working with a flower for 21 days, and you start to see those shifts and those new awarenesses come in. So that's kind of a good guideline for anyone who's new to flower essences and just starting to work with them. Like aim for a 3-week period, take a week off, and then reassess.
Very, very cool. Now, do you guide people through would you guide people through a 21-day process, or is it like yeah, okay.
It's funny you mentioned that, and, but I actually have a fun little resource, so anybody that buys a flower essence from me directly, whether or not that's custom blend, whether or not that's any one of my individual essences, I have a 21-day journal, and it's filled with reflection questions, and each one is different, so it's not like, "How are you feeling today?" and you just answer that for 21 days, it's like, "What new miracles have you experienced in your life?" Or how does your body feel differently today compared to when you started? So along those lines. So it's just a really neat way of kind of having that self-awareness, but also having some prompts if you need a little bit of support. So
Mm.
kind of I call it a flower essence journey. And I typically don't like that word journey when we're talking about health issues because it feels a little bit overused and a little bit oversaturated. But the idea of a journey with plants really is the best way to describe them, this exploration of ourselves and of the plants of our bodies.
That is awesome. I am so glad that I had you on here to talk about this because I really did not know much about it. And I thought if we're going to talk about something on the podcast, like I just love hearing about new things. And then like the questions pop up. I'm like, oh, tell me more, tell me more. And I really did experience that. So thank you for, giving us this insight, this knowledge, this wisdom that you do carry about flower essences and sharing it with the listeners.
And one thing that I think would be super cool just in your work is to actually use flower essences topically, like on EFT points. That just came to me as being a really neat way of incorporating it, like almost kind of anchoring the energy or shifting the energy, because of course we use them on traditional Chinese medicine points as well, even on
Right.
I just feel like EFT and flower essences could be best friends.
Ooh, I love when you have those ideas where you're like different modalities and putting them together and it just creates something, who knows, even
It's
greater.
synchronicity from spirit right now, just blending these modalities. So anybody that uses EFT already, any body workers, right? Chiropractors,
Mhm.
osteopaths, like it's a perfect way to actually use these essences on the body because they will shift. There's certain essences that we even used if you're going for an osteopathy appointment and you want the kind of healing to hold, there's flower essences you can use to kind of anchor in those energies.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll connect. I'll be going through a postpartum period, obviously, in a few months.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that'll be, I'll have to connect with you there because that's always really hard. Like
Yeah.
Pregnancy was one thing, and then postpartum is like the shift of everything, your hormones
Your new
and
identity, right? Even if you've had one baby before, it's that new sense of identity, right? So Dr. Bach's remedy, for example, walnut is this beautiful essence for transitions and anything that changes in our lives. So kind of going over the threshold into something new is walnut is like this superpower, like a shield, and it's so protective, beautiful.
could I use that now?
Of course, absolutely. You can use
Okay.
any of these things. And obviously just mindful of the fact that sometimes they have brandy. So you can just dilute them in water, right? So for people who are sensitive to alcohol, you can dilute them in water. A lot of people will just drop them into their glass and then just take sips from it. So every sip is considered a dose.
Oh,
Or you can just put them right into tea. So there's like literally a million ways to use them. And I also have a free resource for that. So if people are interested in actually how to use them, like as part of their day-to-day life, I have a full color guide on my website at innerplantwisdom.com.
do you send out I have more questions. Do you send out flower essences?
Oh yes. Yeah. I ship all over North America. Oh yeah. And
Okay.
I'll even ship outside North America. I just have to figure out posting or postage because that's always the trick, right? But oh
Okay.
yeah, full service, like e-commerce. I can ship out anything. If you're local, I would drop it off.
All right, Ashleigh. So innerplantwisdom.com, connect with you on Hi Ashleigh Grange and to check out your free resources on your website to learn more.
I just want to kind of remind people that all of the healing they need is within their own body. So
Mm,
much as, it's fun to kind of go outside ourselves for that information. It's like we already know what we need and we just have to connect to that deeper part of us that really just believes that healing is possible for us. So over years, that's really the belief that I wish more people had and that they would go to these resources, as a first line therapy or first line treatment rather than going to their doctor and then coming to me years later saying, I've tried everything else. Now I guess I'll try natural health and natural medicine. It's like come to that place before you get so sick that, it's going to take a bit of unraveling to kind of fix some of those issues that could have been easily adjusted if we dealt
mm.
with stress that's in our lives, for example.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, and I love talking about flower essences.
And that's it for today's episode. Please share it with anyone else who wants to learn more about human design or anyone who may be on their personal growth and spiritual development journey. You can DM me on Instagram to talk about what resonated with you, what you learned about yourself. I love hearing about human design in real life. So I really appreciate those conversations. And if you would like, you can leave a comment, a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. That support means the world. Thank you so much for listening. I know time is a valuable currency. Take care.